When the old systems collapse, it isn't the end. It's the open space where your true frequency finally gives voice to the world. Have you noticed the familiar world rocking, as if searching for new footing? This isn't a glitch. It's your doorway into an entirely new level of the game. Stay tuned, and in just a few minutes you'll see how the Age of Aquarius reveals rules no one ever told you about. You've always known. Somewhere beneath the rehearsed responses, the long-learned roles, the brittle architecture of certainty, you've felt it. A soft unraveling, a quiet pull toward something unnameable, and yet undeniable. The world you were taught to trust no longer holds its shape. The systems flicker, the rules blur. What once passed for truth now tastes like static. This is not confusion. It is emergence. We are not watching the world fall apart. We are watching the veil lift. And what rises in its place is not chaos, but clarity. Strange, uncomfortable, radiant clarity. The kind that doesn't come with answers, but with a shift in perception so total, so cellular, that even the silence begins to sound different. You are not here by accident. If you are reading this, something in you has already cracked open. Not loudly, not all at once, but unmistakably. You have seen the hollow eyes behind perfect smiles. You have felt the exhaustion of maintaining a self that was never yours. You have heard the whisper that asks, again and again, "Is this it?" That whisper is the beginning. It's the signal that the dream is breaking, that the program is glitching, that the story we were given of linear success, of external salvation, of separation dressed as safety, is no longer sustainable. Not just for the world, for your body, your breath, your soul, because the soul knows what time it is. And now the body begins to remember. We are living through the threshold not of an era, but of a reality. The Age of Aquarius is not a trend, not a horoscope, not a metaphor. It is a cosmic shift in the architecture of awareness, a recalibration of what it means to be alive, to belong, to build, to become. It is not arriving. It has already arrived. And the tension you feel? That is the friction of forgetting rubbing up against the electricity of remembrance. This age does not seek your comfort. It seeks your coherence. It peels away the layers of who you were told to be. It exposes the scaffolding beneath your beliefs. It reveals the energetic contracts you never signed but still lived. And in their place, it hands you a mirror, polished, unflinching, and asks, "Who are you without the noise?" There is no map for this. The cartographers are being born now, in real time, inside bodies that ache for truth more than safety. Inside lives that no longer wish to perform. Inside questions that unravel more than they resolve. And that's why this path can feel lonely. Because to hear the frequency of what's next, you must first unplug from the static of what's ending. That means losing the language you once used to define yourself. That means disappointing the projections others placed upon you. That means stepping off timelines built from fear, even when you don't yet know what will replace them. It is terrifying, and it is sacred, because in the space where the known dissolves, the real begins to echo. And that echo? That's where we start. You may not remember when the forgetting began, only that you were born into a world already out of tune with the stars, where time was measured in hours and paychecks, not in spirals and alignments, where the sky above was reduced to weather, and the stories written in constellations were dismissed as myth, fiction, decoration. But once, long ago, we knew, not in words or theories, but in bone and breath. We lived in rhythm with the sky. We saw time not as a straight arrow, but as a wheel, vast, luminous, intelligent. A cycle that turned not just our crops, but our consciousness. And we knew how to listen. That memory, buried but intact, is stirring now. You feel it as a strange familiarity with things you've never studied. a resonance with symbols you've never learned, a soft ache when you look at the stars too long. It's not nostalgia, it's recall, because you've been here before. This isn't your first turning. You've felt the spiral move beneath your feet in other lives, other forms, other collapses. And every time, something inside you has remembered just enough to keep going, to follow the thread, to become the bridge. And the thread is turning again. The earth, in its slow celestial wobble, traces a great circle through the heavens, a 25,920-year breath called the precession of the equinoxes. As it turns, our planet aligns with different constellations, each governing an epoch of human consciousness. We've passed through Taurus, where matter reigned and temples rose, through Aries, where fire and conquest shaped empires, through Pisces, where belief and sacrifice sculpted inner worlds. And now we enter Aquarius. Not a date on a calendar, a frequency, a shift in the sky that reflects a shift in us. The ancients knew these epochs not just as celestial phenomena, but as spiritual seasons. They etched them into stone. They told stories of floods and flames, of gods who descended and civilizations that fell. Not to frighten us, but to prepare us. To remind us that the heavens are not far. They are maps of cycles, of archetypes, of inevitable transformations. Aquarius is the water bearer, but it does not bring water. Pours knowledge, electricity, innovation, truth. It is ruled by Uranus, planet of shocks, awakenings, disruptions that liberate. Its element is air, but not the gentle breeze, the charge before a storm. The clarity after lightning splits the sky. This is the age that demands systems collapse not to punish, but to reveal. That ideas once sacred must now be surrendered if they are not true. That authority can no longer be external. That memory must rise, not from textbooks, but from the soul. Because Pisces, the age we are leaving, taught us to believe without knowing, to follow without seeing. It gave us saviors and sacrifice, devotion and dogma. It taught us to seek the divine outside ourselves, and to suffer for the privilege. Aquarius returns the current inward. It whispers that salvation was never a transaction, that heaven was never elsewhere, that truth cannot be inherited. It must be felt. And so the sky shifts, and so do we. You feel the tides of this transition everywhere now, not just in headlines, but in your heartbeat. You see it in the unraveling of old roles, the destabilization of identities, the hunger for what cannot be found in logic, but only in lived knowing. This is not a crisis. It is a turning, a reorientation from the linear to the spiral, from prescription to perception, from belief to embodiment. And when you begin to hear, truly hear, it doesn't sound like a voice or a message or even an answer. It sounds like something inside you loosening, like breath rediscovered, like silence that vibrates instead of just being empty. It's not the kind of knowledge you can recite. It's the kind that lives in your skin, in the tension behind your eyes, in the subtle yes or no your whole body feels when someone speaks. That's how you know the spiral has found you. Not through information, but through sensation. Through the way the old logic starts to feel brittle. Through the way your soul starts to ache for something wider, wilder, more real. And this ache is not a problem to solve. It's the sign that the great turning has begun in you. You are not watching collapse from the outside. You are inside the metamorphosis. You are the chrysalis cracking, the thread fraying at just the right point, the echo of endings wrapped in the geometry of beginnings. And this in-between, this liminal place between the death of one frequency and the rise of another, this is where transformation gets real. Because the age of Aquarius doesn't arrive like a sunrise. It arrives like a tectonic shift. It's not gentle. It doesn't ask. It simply comes, through the unraveling of everything you once called solid, through the crumbling of systems that can no longer carry the charge, through the relationships that no longer feel alive, through the questions that replace every old answer with a breathless maybe. And this is where many turn away, because the spiral does not flatter. It deconstructs. It doesn't entertain the ego. It exposes it. And not to punish, but to free. To strip you of what is not yours, so what is can finally come forward. The voice that was silenced. The knowing that was buried. The you that was waiting for the world to stop long enough to be heard. Well, the world has stopped. Or at least the world you once knew. And what's left is this, a raw, unscripted, unrepeatable moment where you decide, not what to do next, but who to become now. Because the future doesn't descend fully formed. It arrives through frequency, through decision, through the quiet, trembling choice to no longer play the old game. This is the initiation, not with fire and symbols, but with presence. Not with rituals, but with release. The release of control, of the false self, of the lie that you need to know before you begin. You don't. You only need to listen. To the body, to the breath, to the ache, to the way your cells lean toward truth like plants toward light. That's the new compass. That's the spiral path. It may not be marked, but it is unmistakable. And if you're still here, still reading, still feeling this in places you can't quite name, it means the path is opening. Not in front of you, through you, because you are not being led. You are being reassembled. The age of Aquarius doesn't offer maps. It offers mirrors. You can feel it even in the quiet, the tension between what's dissolving and what's not yet formed. A strange gravity pulling you inward, even as the world around you crumbles in slow motion. This is the paradox of collapse. It feels like everything is ending, but what's really ending is everything that isn't true. And in that collapse, there is intelligence. Not the intelligence of strategy or structure, the intelligence of life itself, rearranging the pieces. What you once called chaos may, in time, be seen as choreography. Because the age of Aquarius doesn't destroy for pleasure. It dismantles to make space. Space for the real. For the pattern underneath the programming. For the being beneath the identity. And this is why collapse isn't punishment. It's precision. It strips away only what cannot move forward with you. Not out of cruelty, but out of alignment. It knows what belongs to your soul and what belongs to the scaffolding that held it back. And so the job in these moments is not to fix or fight, but to feel. To feel the grief of releasing lives that were never really lived. To feel the liberation that rushes in when you stop pretending. To feel the space, vast, unfamiliar, that opens when the mask falls. Because this space is where your new life begins. Not the life built from plans, but the life that remembers itself into being. And that kind of life doesn't arrive through achievement. It arrives through surrender. Through letting go of the need to be certain. Through becoming willing to meet the unknown not as a threat, but as a teacher. And the unknown is generous when you stop fearing it. It will show you things you didn't know you carried. Longings too wild to name. Fears disguised as ambition. Desires that stretch your capacity to receive. It will ask for your participation but not your performance. Because Aquarius has no interest in roles. It wants your resonance. And resonance begins in collapse. When the old chords no longer play. When the noise dies down enough for you to hear your own frequency. Faint at first, but unmistakable. That is the sound of alignment. It doesn't shout. It hums. It's the yes that needs no explanation. The no that vibrates through your bones. The moment of stillness in the center of your undoing that says, this is the way. And that way is not linear. Curves. Pauses. It returns. It winds through grief, through wonder, through the strange terrain of becoming someone who no longer fits the old story. And that dissonance, that not fitting, is the gift. Because to collapse what isn't you is to begin reclaiming what always was. The you that didn't need a script. The you that spoke in energy, not explanation. The you that knows how to live by frequency. This is the great deprogramming. Not of facts, but of frameworks. Not of content, but of consciousness. And as you step deeper into that clearing, you begin to notice. Others are here too. Quietly, gently, doing the same work. Not leading movements, but living truths. Not building empires, but tending to their field. And that field, collective, vibrational, luminous, is where we'll go next. Because collapse isn't the end. It's the thinning of the veil. And what comes after is not rebuilding what was. It's becoming what always waited on the other side. And now, in the wake of collapse, the question emerges like breath after submersion. If the structures no longer guide me, what will? This is where the age of resonance begins. You are no longer being asked to obey, to prove, to perform. You are being asked to listen, not with your ears, but with your field. Not to authority, but to alignment. Resonance, that subtle hum, that cellular yes, that unmistakable pull toward truth, is the new compass now. And it doesn't speak in words. It speaks in frequency. You already know this language. You've felt it in the sudden peace when you enter a space that welcomes your whole being. In the way your body relaxes around someone who needs nothing from you. In the strange discomfort around those who say the right things but vibrate something else entirely. That discomfort is not judgment. It's information. Resonance doesn't ask you to explain. It asks you to notice. Because in this age, noticing is knowing. No more deferring to what looks good on paper. No more overriding your instincts because the data says otherwise. Aquarius doesn't care how it appears. Cares how it feels. And feeling is not emotionality. It's vibrational discernment. You can't fake resonance. You can't brand it. You can't optimize it. And that's what makes it sacred. It is your most intimate, incorruptible form of knowing, and it has waited lifetimes for your full attention. But attention in this culture has been hijacked, trained to follow noise, novelty, drama, pulled outward until it forgets its origin point. That's why part of this transition feels like returning home from a long, strange exile, not to a place, but to a frequency. To the quiet center that has never stopped vibrating truth, even as you tuned it out. And now you are tuning back in. You feel the difference between empty connection and embodied presence, between hollow productivity and soul-led movement, between saying the thing and being the thing. This is what Aquarius rewards. Not appearances, alignment, not hustle, harmony, not ambition, attunement. But here's the secret. Living by resonance is not passive. It requires exquisite attention, relentless honesty, the courage to say no without needing a reason, the devotion to say yes even when it disrupts everything you thought you wanted. It requires trusting that your frequency is wiser than your mind, that what expands you is more important than what impresses others, that what feels light is often more true than what feels familiar. And this can be terrifying because it means letting go of maps that once made you feel safe. It means walking away from people who match your history but not your future. It means honoring your body when it says rest, even when the world demands performance. But in that honoring, you begin to build something radical, self-trust. Not the kind based on achievement, but the kind based on integrity. Integrity not as morality, but as coherence. When your thoughts, your words, your actions, your energy match. That's resonance in motion. That's what it means to live as a tuning fork instead of a chameleon. And the more you live this way, the more your field calibrates. The more the right people find you, not through strategy, but through frequency match. the more opportunities align without chasing. The more your presence becomes your offering. Because when you're in resonance, everything you touch carries that vibration. Your food tastes different. Your voice carries different codes. Your creations transmit more than information, they transmit state. This is why the Aquarian age is not about content. It's about current. What are you transmitting when you walk into a room? When you speak your truth? When you choose yourself? That is your impact, not what you say, but what you vibrate. And that vibration is always telling the truth. This is why lying feels heavier now. Why pretending burns faster. Why old patterns collapse even when you try to revive them. Because the field is too intelligent to support incoherence. It's not punishing you. It's aligning you. And alignment in this age is the new success. Not numbers. Not followers. Not fame. Coherence. Presence. Truth without distortion. And this truth will cost you everything that was built on pretending, but what remains is clean, sustainable, alive. It begins quietly, not with declarations or breakups or boundary-setting scripts, but with a shift in how your body responds. The conversation that once excited you now leaves you dull. The laughter you used to perform now feels sharp, shallow. The way you contort to preserve connection begins to ache. This is how resonance works in relationships. It starts by making the false unbearable. Not as punishment, as purification. Because connection in the Aquarian field is no longer about agreement. It's about energetic congruence. About how two nervous systems, two fields, two frequencies interact without needing to perform. You don't need shared interests. You need shared resonance. Not similarity, but clarity. This clarity dismantles the old contract. The one that said, stay loyal even when your soul is shrinking. Stay because it's been years. Stay because they need you, because they'd fall apart without you, because you're afraid to be alone. That contract is dissolving now, not with cruelty, but with sacred finality. Because Aquarius doesn't honor obligation. It honors authenticity, and authenticity is ruthless with illusion. You'll notice it when you speak and someone doesn't flinch at your truth. When your silence is met with presence instead of projection. When you can breathe fully in someone's space because they're not trying to fix you, change you, decode you. They're just with you. These are the connections that thrive now. Not in fantasy, in frequency. Not in performance, in permission. And the more attuned you become, the more the old forms begin to collapse. The romance built on rescuing. The friendship built on mutual masking. The bond that only functions if you keep suppressing your knowing. You can't do it anymore. You won't do it anymore. Not because you don't love them, but because you finally love yourself enough not to betray your signal. This shift doesn't always come with closure. Sometimes it comes with confusion, with distance, with strange silences and misalignments that can't be fixed with words. Sometimes the frequency simply changes and you feel it like a drop in air pressure, like static where there once was flow. Trust that. You're not being cold. You're being honest. And honesty is the only thing that sustains now. This doesn't mean you're meant to cut everyone out. It means you stop abandoning yourself to stay. You stop holding relationships in place through sheer force of habit. You let what wants to leave, leave. You let what's real rise. And in its place, something radical begins to emerge. Relational resonance. The connections that form here don't need contracts. They don't need constant reassurance. They don't require you to be any version of yourself but the true one. They are fluid, but not unstable. Committed, but not clinging. Intimate, but not invasive. They're built on the simple truth. I see you and I stay not because I need you, but because it feels right to. This is not idealism. It's coherence in motion. And the more you live in coherence, the more you become allergic to anything else. You stop tolerating half-truths. You stop chasing chemistry that's unaccompanied by safety. You stop sacrificing your sanity for someone else's comfort. This can feel like loss at first, but it's not loss. It's calibration. It's your field releasing entanglements that no longer match your code. It's your soul saying, "This chapter is complete," even if the mind still wants more pages. And as you make peace with that, something beautiful begins to happen. You become a signal for a different kind of love. A love that doesn't need to be loud to be felt. A love that doesn't wear costumes or masks or timelines. A love that honors pace, process, and presence. And when that kind of love arrives through a partner, a friend, a stranger in passing, you'll know. Because your body will relax. Your breath will deepen. Your field will hum in recognition. This I remember. And from that recognition, something begins to stir not only in how you relate, but in how you create. Because once you stop contorting yourself in connection, the energy you were using to maintain old forms becomes available. And it begins to surge, not randomly, but with direction. A quiet urge to build, to offer, to speak, to shape something real. Not because anyone expects it. Not because it earns applause. But because you feel full enough to overflow. This is when the concept of purpose starts to soften, then dissolve. No longer a title, a mission, a role to wear like armor. Purpose becomes less about doing, more about being. Not what you chase, but what you carry. The energy you bring into a room. The clarity you hold in a moment of noise. The way your presence sharpens truth without speaking a word. You may still have a profession. You may still set goals. But none of it owns you. None of it defines you. Because your identity is no longer glued to productivity. You begin to sense that your real work is vibrational. That the meetings, the deadlines, the structures are just containers. The content is you, your state, your signal, your alignment in motion. And when alignment becomes the source, effort reorganizes itself. You no longer hustle from deficit. You move from overflow. You rest without guilt. Because rest isn't idleness. It's attunement. It's where the next clarity waits. You begin to trust the pauses. You stop pushing through dissonance just to stay relevant. The old paradigm taught you to monetize your essence. This one asks you to become your essence. Not to market it, to embody it, and let that embodiment lead. From this place, even simple acts become transmission. The way you write an email, the way you greet a stranger, the tone in your voice when you say no. Everything begins to carry your frequency, not because you're trying, but because you're clear. And the clearer you become, the more your life reorders itself around that clarity. The projects that no longer hold your truth begin to disassemble, not as punishment, but as refinement. The collaborations that once made sense begin to fade. New invitations appear not because you chase them, but because they match your field. This is not a shortcut. It's the natural rhythm of coherence. When your inner state aligns, your outer life cannot help but follow. But here's what most miss. This kind of living often appears slow, invisible, unremarkable from the outside. Because the true work is subtle, quiet. It happens in how you choose, in how you pause, in what you no longer force. It's not about scaling. It's about sinking. And when you sink, your contribution changes. It becomes less about your brand, your niche, your authority. It becomes about your impact on the field, about what your presence makes possible for others, about what ideas, energies, and insights move through you because you've done the inner clearing. You start to realize that your true legacy is vibrational. Not what you build, but how you build it. Not what you say, but what shifts when you speak. Not what you teach, but how your frequency allows others to remember. And so, the old ambition starts to loosen. You no longer chase relevance. You no longer climb ladders that lead to nowhere. You begin to walk your path, not in a straight line, but in spirals of yes, in orbits of resonance. There may be moments where you feel like nothing is happening, where you're tempted to revert to speed, to noise, to comparison. But wait, in those still spaces, something deeper is gestating. Not an outcome, a current. And that current, once trusted, will carry you further than effort ever could. Because you're no longer trying to matter. You know you matter. And from that knowing, you become magnetic in ways that strategy could never replicate. You become the field you once tried to reach. And everything begins to reorganize around that signal. There is a moment, and it doesn't arrive with fanfare, when you realize that everything you once sought is already inside the field you carry. Not because you have all the answers, but because you've stopped betraying the questions. You're no longer reaching outward for validation, you're listening inward for resonance. The need to prove, to please, to polish dissolves. And what remains is naked presence. In this presence, something else begins to shift, your perception of time. It doesn't move the way it used to. No longer a line to race along or a ladder to climb, it becomes something more fluid, more cyclical. You begin to sense that not every season is for action. Not every day is meant to be filled. Not every impulse requires momentum. And in that slowing, you encounter a different kind of intelligence. One that lives in the pause, in the breath, in the space between steps. You are not falling behind. You are syncing with something ancient, a rhythm that doesn't tick, but pulses, a timeline that isn't ruled by clocks, but by coherence. You notice the way your energy expands in some spaces and contracts in others, not based on time spent, but on depth touched. A minute of truth can feel like an hour. A month of noise can disappear like smoke. This elasticity is not disorientation. It's alignment asserting itself. You stop measuring your life by output. You start measuring it by frequency. And as that measure takes hold, the tyranny of the calendar loosens its grip. You no longer need to be busy to feel worthy. You no longer fill your days to avoid your inner world. You become more interested in potency than in pace. More attuned to what wants to emerge than what needs to be managed. This doesn't mean you abandon structure. It means your structure becomes sacred. You start organizing your life around energy instead of expectation. Around the body's wisdom instead of external demand. You honor the days when rest is the work. The hours when silence is the teacher. The cycles when creation is invisible, subterranean, weaving itself in the dark. And in this shift, urgency begins to feel like violence. You no longer rush your clarity. You no longer compress your truth to meet a deadline. You no longer force a yes when your field is still settling. You let life unfold at the speed of trust. Because trust is the new gravity. It holds you steady in the in-between. It reminds you that alignment is not passive. It's precise. It allows you to move without panic, to wait without numbness, to follow the invisible instructions written not in language, but in light. And slowly, almost imperceptibly, your life begins to shape itself around this new rhythm. You find yourself in the right place without planning, saying the right thing without rehearsal, meeting the right person without effort, not because you manipulated the timeline, but because you aligned with your own. This is what Aquarius wants. Not perfection, but participation. Not control, but coherence. Not timelines built from scarcity, but lives sculpted by soul time. You begin to notice that your very presence distorts the old matrix of time. That people soften around you. That spaces quiet themselves. That decisions come easier. Because you are no longer broadcasting urgency. You are broadcasting availability to what is real, to what is ripe, to what is ready. And from that availability, creation becomes inevitable. Not the kind you schedule, but the kind that arrives unannounced. The kind that knocks softly, then floods your entire system with clarity. The kind that doesn't ask, "What should I make?" but rather, "What wants to move through me now?" And you know what to do, not because you've been told, because you feel it, because time no longer moves you. You move with time, and from that place of quiet movement, something ancient begins to wake inside your hands. A hum, a rhythm, a subtle instruction not from the mind, but from a deeper intelligence, the kind that doesn't explain itself, only unfolds through action. You may find yourself reaching for tools you haven't used in years. Sketching lines, writing words, humming melodies that feel like they belong to someone older, wider, yet unmistakably you. This is what creation becomes when it's no longer transactional. When it isn't about output but offering. When it stops asking, "What will they think?" and starts asking, "Is this true?" You begin to understand that creativity was never meant to decorate the world. It was meant to reweave it. Every brushstroke, every phrase, every movement is a thread in the unseen tapestry of the field. Not because it's grand, but because it's aligned. Not because it changes the world in an instant, but because it alters the current that flows through it. You are no longer creating to be seen. You are creating to transmit. This is the quiet revolution of the Aquarian artist. Not the performer, but the conduit. Not the genius, but the listener. You don't invent. You attune. You don't impose. You respond. And what comes through is not always tidy, not always beautiful, but it always carries charge. Because when you create from coherence, your work becomes more than expression. It becomes resonance, a living frequency that moves beyond medium or meaning, straight into the nervous system of whoever encounters it. A mirror, a signal, a homecoming, and not everyone will understand it. That's no longer your concern. The age of Aquarius doesn't ask for consensus. It asks for clarity. The clearer your frequency, the more naturally your creations find the ones meant to receive them. Not through marketing, through magnetism, not through branding, through being. You may begin to notice that your best ideas come when you stop trying. When you're walking, showering, breathing. When the mind relaxes its grip and the field finally gets a chance to speak. You begin to trust these moments. You begin to shape your life to allow them. You stop chasing the muse. You become the place where it wants to land. And in that landing, you stop asking how good it is. You start asking how true it feels. You stop editing the wildness out of your work. You stop dimming the parts that feel too much. You start letting the raw, the holy, the unresolved come through. Because you know that truth vibrates louder than polish. That presence carries farther than performance. You begin to see that every act of creation is also an act of remembering. A way the soul reminds itself of what it already knows. A thread that connects the inner world to the outer one. And in this threading, something real takes root. A kind of quiet confidence that doesn't need applause, only alignment. You may still publish, share, offer. But the energy has changed. You are no longer asking the world to validate your voice. You are offering your voice as vibration. And that vibration will move in ways you may never trace. It may reach someone in a moment of unraveling and remind them they are not alone. It may unlock something in a stranger across oceans. It may shift the energy of a space without a single word. You begin to see yourself not just as a creator, but as a frequency holder. And you begin to treat your work, your words, your silence, your vision as sacred, not precious, not untouchable, just intentional. Because you know now, what you create creates you. And when your creation is born of truth, it becomes not just something you do, but something you are. And what you are, your field, your coherence, your vibration, does not end at the edges of your skin. It extends subtly, powerfully, into everything you touch, into rooms before you enter them, into words before they're spoken, into the unseen lattice of reality that responds not to your intentions, but to your state. You are not an isolated mind in a body. You are a node in a vast network, the living grid of collective awareness. And that grid is waking up, not all at once, not in spectacle but in pulses, in quiet uprisings of truth, in sudden departures from false belonging, in small, courageous choices to feel more deeply, speak more honestly, rest more radically. Each of these acts, no matter how private, reshapes the field, because the collective is not an abstraction. It is made of moments, of people, of you. You've already felt it. The electricity that sparks when you meet someone who vibrates with the same clarity. The sense of expansion, of instant trust. The ease that emerges when no one is performing. That is not coincidence. That is coherence. Two fields resonating without resistance. And that coherence is contagious. Not in the way of disease, but in the way of music. One clear tone awakens another. One aligned being makes room for others to remember themselves. You've seen it happen in circles where people shed years of armor in hours. In gatherings where truth ripples louder than words. In connections that feel like reunions, not introductions. This is the new intelligence coming online. Not centralized. Not hierarchical. Not owned. Distributed. Horizontal. Electric. It doesn't move through institutions. It moves through people, through presence, through frequency, through the willingness to be deeply, unapologetically awake in a world still dreaming. And it's growing. You may feel like you're the only one. You're not. There are thousands, millions tuning in quietly, rejecting the scripts, rewriting the codes, learning to build from a different place. One not fueled by fear, but by truth. And this building doesn't always look like action. Sometimes it looks like presence. Sometimes it looks like saying no when you used to say yes. Sometimes it looks like walking away, not in anger, but in clarity. Each of these acts is a shift in the collective field, a break in the old frequency, a seam where light gets in. You don't need to lead a movement. You are the movement, not the face of it, the frequency of it. And frequency, once stabilized, is unstoppable. This is what the old systems fear, not revolt but resonance, not protests but presence, not conflict but clarity. Because when enough people remember who they are, remember how to feel, remember how to trust their own knowing, no amount of control can hold. Not because they fight back, because they simply stop consenting. This is how the world changes now. Not with fire, with field. Not by overthrowing, by outgrowing. Not by shouting, by vibrating a new possibility so clearly that the old one can no longer maintain itself. And the clearer your own field becomes, the more you will feel the distortion of what isn't aligned. Not as fear, as friction, as information. You begin to notice what contracts you, what confuses you, what calls for your compromise. Not to judge it, to disengage from it, to choose again. And each choice ripples. This is the power of living as a signal. You no longer ask, what can I fix out there? You ask, what am I still holding in here that supports the lie? And in releasing it, you free not just yourself, but everyone connected to your strand in the web. Because in this age, healing is not personal. It is systemic. It is grid work. It is every act of coherence anchoring the new blueprint, silently, consistently, undeniably, into the field. You begin to realize that the real architecture isn't made of stone or law, but of stories, agreements, invisible codes repeated so often they become solid. And when you stop repeating them, When you stop feeding them with your energy, your fear, your silence, they begin to dissolve. This is the quiet dismantling. It doesn't need permission. It happens when one person chooses alignment over approval. When someone listens to the no in their bones and acts on it. When a mother stops lying to her children to keep the peace. When a worker walks away from a system that poisons their body. When a leader says, "I don't know," and lets truth lead instead of ego. These moments don't make headlines, but they are tectonic, because they shift the resonance of the field. And that field is listening. You've always been a part of it, whether you knew it or not. Every emotion you've felt, every thought you've carried, every act of courage or compromise, all of it has shaped the collective environment we call the world. It is not separate. It is not distant. It is made of us. And now you are learning to participate with intention. Not just through action, but through frequency stewardship. Through the realization that your inner alignment is not a personal achievement. It is service. That your healing does not isolate you. It connects you. That your clarity is not for your benefit alone. It radiates into the shared field and alters what is possible for others. You've felt this too. In the way certain people make you feel safe without words. In the way one moment of truth can ripple into weeks of insight. In the way something in you shifts just by being near someone who has stopped pretending. This is not magic. This is resonance in practice. And the more of us who live this way, the stronger the field becomes. Not more visible, more coherent, more stable. A scaffolding of truth rising silently beneath the collapse. It doesn't matter if we are scattered across continents. It doesn't matter if we never meet. The signal does not care about distance, cares about depth. And that depth, your depth, is what carries the codes of what comes next. So when you doubt, return to the field. When you forget, return to the frequency. When the noise gets loud, find stillness, not to escape, but to remember what is real. Because you are not separate from the world unraveling. You are the place where the unraveling ends, and the new thread begins. And that thread doesn't ask for performance. It asks for presence. Not to hold everything, just to hold your strand. And in doing so, to anchor the whole. And as you hold your strand, simple, clear, unadorned, you start to feel what's always been underneath the performance. A steadiness, a subtle pulse, a hum of something not external, not new, but deeply remembered. The thread of who you were before the programming, before the fragmentation, before the need to become anything other than this. This is where the dismantling of the self begins, not the true self, but the version constructed to survive the old frequency. The self that was shaped to be acceptable. The self that learned to adapt, to shrink, to succeed in a world built on scarcity. The self that wore beliefs like armor, not because they resonated, but because they protected. You begin to see how much of your identity was never truly chosen. It was inherited, imposed, rewarded, fear-conditioned. An Aquarius doesn't let you keep what isn't yours. Not out of cruelty, out of devotion to your essence. It pulls back the curtain, gently or suddenly, and invites you to see the masks, the scripts, the strategies. Not to shame them, but to bless them, thank them, and release them. Because they got you here, but they cannot take you further. You cannot walk into the new carrying what was built in fear. This is the sacred burn. The undoing not as collapse, but as purification. And it happens not all at once, but in waves. In small moments of awareness that shift your entire frequency. When you realize the anxiety you feel isn't yours, it's inherited. When you hear yourself say something that doesn't feel true, and you stop mid-sentence. When you notice the decision you've been postponing isn't about logistics, it's about finally being honest. And honesty in this frequency is everything. You can no longer lie to yourself without cost. The body tenses. The field warps. The path clouds. Not as punishment, but as signal. You are being guided by sensation now, not obligation. Every contraction is information. Every expansion is instruction. And the more you listen, the more your life becomes a feedback loop of resonance, refining, deepening, clarifying who you actually are. Not who you thought you should be. Not who others need you to be. But the self beneath the story. The one who doesn't perform alignment, but lives it. And living it may mean letting go of more than you expected. Not just roles or routines, but dreams that were shaped in distortion. Goals that were born in scarcity. Desires that were survival-coded, not soul-chosen. Letting go can feel like loss, but it is space-making. It is preparation. It is the clearing of the field so something true can take root. And that truth, it will not arrive in the form of certainty. It will arrive as softness, as clarity that doesn't argue, as breath where there used to be tension. You may find yourself doing less, but feeling more, saying less but meaning more, needing less but offering more, not out of depletion but from depth. This is the paradox of becoming whole. The less you chase identity, the more your essence emerges. You no longer need to prove yourself. You are yourself. And from that simplicity you become unmistakable. Not louder, clearer. And in a world that rewards distortion, your clarity becomes the most dangerous, most liberating, most healing thing of all. And once you have tasted this clarity, even for a breath, even in stillness, you cannot go back. Not truly. You might try to re-enter the old rooms, to wear the familiar masks, to soften your truth to make it more palatable. But your body will protest. Your field will distort. Your soul will whisper, not here, not this, not anymore. Because coherence has a cost, and once you've paid it, anything less feels violent. It's not pride, it's resonance. And resonance doesn't tolerate compromise. It does not bend for convenience. It calls you into alignment again and again, not as punishment, but as path. This path isn't linear. It doesn't promise safety. It will ask for things you thought you needed, and return you to parts of yourself you forgot you had. But what it gives you in return is something the old world could never offer: integrity. Not the kind built on moral performance, but the kind that radiates from wholeness. You begin to feel this integrity in the smallest things: how your breath slows in truth, how your words change shape when they come from stillness, how your presence affects a space more than your opinions ever could. You begin to realize that being yourself, fully, deeply, unapologetically, is not just healing, it is revolutionary. And that revolution doesn't always look like action. Sometimes it looks like a quiet no. Sometimes like a sudden ending. Sometimes like a deep exhale as you finally stop pretending. This is the deeper work of the Aquarian age. Not to fix the world, but to unerase yourself within it. To stop outsourcing your knowing. To stop renting space in your own mind to systems that were never designed for your flourishing. To reclaim not just your choices, but your frequency. And in doing so, you begin to notice something unexpected. Your sensitivity, once seen as a flaw, is now a compass. Your grief, once seen as weakness, is now a doorway. Your slowness, once shamed, becomes a sanctuary for clarity. What you once hid to survive now becomes the very essence of your signal. Because what's needed now is not more performance, but presence. Not more conformity, but coherence. Not more strategy, but soul. You start to see that healing is not something to achieve, but something to remember. Not a state to reach, but a rhythm to return to. And each time you come back, to your body, your breath, your center, you deepen the signal. You start walking through life differently. You stop rushing to explain. You begin to trust that your vibration says more than your words ever could. You stop chasing belonging, because you have become a space where belonging lives. And from this space you start to recognize others, not by name, not by appearance, but by resonance. You meet eyes and remember. You sit in silence and feel language move without sound. You gather without agenda and still something organizes. A deeper intelligence. A field that holds more than any structure ever could. Because the new world is not being built through systems. It is being transmitted through people. One clear field at a time. One honest choice at a time. One embodied truth at a time. Not loud, not fast, but unstoppable. Because coherence always is. And the deeper you walk into coherence, the quieter it becomes, not from emptiness, but from density. From a truth so whole it no longer needs to announce itself. You begin to feel that you don't need to explain your existence. You don't need to defend your choices. You don't need to decorate your becoming with permission. You simply are. And in that being, the frequency transmits itself. You've become the thing you were searching for. Not as a final form, but as a living field, in motion, in listening, in rhythm with what's true now. And what's true now cannot be held by old stories. Cannot be explained through categories. It cannot be measured by productivity or popularity or praise. It moves outside those systems. It pulses through moments that feel too small to matter, but change everything. The conversation where you say what you've always swallowed. The step you take toward a life with fewer lies. The hour of rest you refuse to apologize for. The dream that returns without asking. These are not fragments. They are transmissions. They are the weave of a new timeline, not linear, but layered. Not loud, but luminous. You start to understand that the future doesn't arrive through grand declarations. It ripens through consistency, through attention, through the small, radical acts of living like your energy matters. Not to prove something, but to become something. To become the kind of presence that makes alignment contagious. To become the kind of silence that reveals the signal. To become the kind of witness that allows others to drop their masks. Because now you see, the age of Aquarius doesn't come to save. It comes to strip away the reasons you forgot you didn't need saving. It doesn't replace the old gods. It reminds you there was divinity in your breath all along. It doesn't demand you change the world. It asks you to stop betraying yourself in the name of a world that was never real. You are not here to perform awakening. You are here to embody wholeness. And wholeness is not perfection. It is presence without fragmentation. It is truth without ornament. It is love that doesn't ask for anything back. And when you live from that place, even for a moment, something clicks into the field. Something stabilizes. Something ancient and future and utterly immediate. A remembering that spreads through the web, through the people around you, through the grid beneath your feet. The signal strengthens. The spiral tightens. The field pulses with coherence. Not because you tried harder, but because you finally stopped pretending. And now the real work begins, not in effort but in being. Not in plans but in pulse. Not in escape but in return. Return to your breath. Return to your rhythm. Return to the quiet knowing that was with you long before the noise. There is no more waiting. No more seeking. Only the soft, undeniable hum of now. And you humming with it. Let that vibration spill outward. Let it weave with others who are listening to the same silent music. If this message landed in your chest, type, "I feel the hum," in the comments below so our frequencies can find each other. And if you'd like more moments like this, more space, more clarity, more of the hidden architecture of the Age of Aquarius revealed, press subscribe and ring the bell. This journey isn't meant to be walked alone. We're tuning the new world together, note by note.